everyone!
I'm your friend Pallet. I'm your DIY gal.
Sorry for this intro. I have ended up with a whole bunch of single shadows. They kind of hang out in a box or on top of shelves, and I need a place to keep them. So today we are going to make a few magnetic palettes. For the sake of space, we're gonna move this party over to the dining table. Let's go. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you do, please give it a thumbs up. That lets me know that people are watching it, loving it. Share it with people who you think would enjoy. And thanks again for watching. Bye. Can I stop rhyming? I can't seem to stop. Alright. Now we are at my dining table. I might be whispering a little bit because my little one is sleeping like right there. So I have, as I said earlier, plans for a few different palettes. So the first one is this Ulta Beauty palette. It retails for $12. Currently it is free on Ulta.com. If you buy Eyeshadows, it didn't arrive like this. All of these came like individually in these little containers. And it comes with a, what they call like a little prying tool or depotting tool. Why is it? It's not depotting. You're just kind of pulling them out. But and a brush. The brush is not bad. So what I did was I kind of opened this and I checked underneath. The magnet is like just a plain sheet, just like the ColourPop palettes, and it's not cutouts, which is awesome because then all I need to do is cut it by the sides, and that will make all of this space usable. So let's do that.
So we just cut the foam insert using an exacto knife and any straight object. Make sure that your knife is sharp, and instead of cutting the entire thickness of the foam in one stroke, do multiple light strokes. That way your foam won't kind of shatter. You can do the same thing with any of your old palettes that you're hitting pan on, or palettes that you don't care for. Just pop out the pans and make it into a magnetic palette just by adding a magnetic sheet at the bottom, as you'll see in the next palette that we make. If there is any glue left, you can clean it up with some alcohol.
I initially thought that I would just cut this off too, but there's no magnet in this area, so you know. An advantage is this palette comes with a nice sized mirror, so which is I think pretty cool. And then I'm gonna use a permanent marker to just kind of mask the white that is showing, if there's any ink in this. Okay, grabbed a different one that actually works, hopefully. And we're finished. This one can definitely now hold way more than just 8 shadows. And I continued drawing on it with the permanent marker, which just gives a slight sheen. I think it looks a little bit more interesting to have that. Still looks boring on the outside, but more functional. Moving on.
I think that this project is going to be a little more complicated. If a palette is not going to give me a window to see what's inside, at least it should give me a mirror, right?
I've had this old Elizabeth Arden mirror for a while now. So I don't know. I'm thinking somehow I'm going to add this here so that this palette is more functional. And I have no idea how I'm going to do that. I hope if I don't crack this mirror by the end of okay, so if I don't crack this mirror, it's going to be somewhere here. Somehow. Okay. For now, let's continue doing. This is not my idea at all. I just pretty much got it off of YouTube and internet. Just supposed to slice off. This is a kind of notebook I got from the Dollar Tree. You have to be careful not to cut off like the original binding. So after much struggle and like heat method with aluminum foil over electric burner coils, I managed to remove the mirror, but yeah, not before I kind of ended up chipping it a few times. So, but anyways, I think because I'll need to tape up the edges anyways, that will be okay. This is a foam board. It's from Dollar Tree. I'm just gonna mark it and cut it out. And to mark it, I'm just using the papers that were inside here because this fits exactly inside and that's what we want. So I'm gonna use this to mark our foam board.
So I mark and cut out 2 rectangles from the foam board. The reason I need 2 is because my foam board is pretty thin and I need double the thickness to achieve the depth I need in my palette. And then I cut off a rectangle from the center so that I'm left with an outer frame. I'm pretty much eyeballing the width of the frame here, but later on I'll show you that it's much better to actually cut out strips and then form the rectangle instead of cutting it this way. It's much harder to do it this way. I could not find the adhesive back magnetic sheets that everybody recommends for such projects. Instead, I found some weekly planners that had a magnetic backing, and I'm just going to use that instead. Now, the magnet on these planners isn't very strong, but they are able to hold the Ulta shadows that I have. I cut a section of the sheet that easily but snugly fits inside my frame. So I chose a wrapping paper to wrap my tray with. I cut out a section large enough that it can go over the edges or the frame per se. I also inserted 2 squares of the magnetic strip on either side of the front edge of the frame before finishing the wrapping. I then added the same wrapping paper on what's going to be the lid of the palette and added matching magnets in the top 2 corners. And I thought I was finished. But then my husband pointed out that the wrapping paper I used made the whole thing look very childish, which I agreed with, tried to take it off, and it ended up ripping the whole thing. So I repeated the whole process with the wrapping paper that I actually like. I also realized that the little squares of magnets in the corners weren't really holding the lid closed. So I added a whole strip along the entire front edge of the frame and a matching strip on the lid. The decorative washi tape was only used to hide a little damage I had on the exterior. For the final palette, my initial idea was to use a notebook from the Dollar Tree, one of the large ones, and a magnifying sheet and do a cutout in the front cover of the notebook and pop in this magnifying sheet in it and then just do the rest like the previous palette. But the problem was that the notebook covers were very flimsy and the magnifying sheet just kept on like popping out, and especially the binding portion of the notebook was not really good, and I just ended up hating the outcome and just kept on adding more and more and more washi tape, and it was just not good. So I ripped everything off and started anew, and this time I decided that I'll just use the bottom tray and just add the magnifying sheet as a lid directly. And I just totally dropped the idea of using a notebook in this case. And in addition, I have decided to add a thin sheet of cardboard all around the foam frame on top as well as the outer and the inner edges, because when I tried to wrap the last frame from the last palette, I wasn't getting the really crisp edges and corners, and the foam kept on moving and it was a little difficult to wrap. I found this tiny little magnet inside the Cabana Boy blush sample that I got in one of my Ipsy bags, and I was going to depot it anyways, and then I noticed that it has a magnetic closure, and I opened that part up and found this magnet with a metal plate. So that is what I'm going to use instead of the magnetic strip for this palette. I also switched to the wood glue instead of the hot glue gun because the hot glue gun was drying too fast and clumping, and it was just a hot mess basically.
Only problem with the wood glue is that it's harsh on your skin, so I don't care. But yeah, just if anybody is concerned, I think they should know that.
Please notice that instead of cutting out a rectangular frame like the last time, I have just cut long strips of the foam and then joined them together to make the frame. You can temporarily join the ends together using small pieces of tape in order to keep them approximated. Sticking down the top now. Wood glue works the best if you apply a thin layer on both the surfaces, let them get slightly tacky for a few seconds, and then ideally you clamp them together. I have chosen shelf liner to line my bottom tray with. I have already cut out a piece, leaving 4 centimeters on all the 4 sides so that it allows the wrapping. The reason why I have chosen the shelf liner is because it's waterproof, it is self-adhesive, and I like the stone-like print that it has. So we take the backing paper off, center the tray, and I have managed to get my ruler stuck. The shelf liner instructions advise you to kind of scrape out the bubbles if there are any, and that didn't quite work. Anywho, we are going to start wrapping the tray from the back side. Ignore the little cutout in the corner. Initially, I thought that would make the wrapping easier, but later on I was worried that if I'm not very precise with placement of the tray on the sticky, then the whole thing will just get messy. So yeah, ignore that. We press down on the top of the back side and the 2 vertical sides, and then cut the paper along the very back edge. And cut it again along the vertical edge, allowing a slight margin to fold down till the cut that we just made. We fold down the little margin that we just created. Make a third cut along the back bottom edge and fold that little flap in. Repeat the same process on the other side. Now we are going to cut as close as possible to the inner edge of the vertical sides and then stick down the flap that gets created. The goal is to create a flap that is long enough to cover the closest edge. That's what is going to give us a polished look. So trim down any of the excess flaps because that will give us a bulky, clumpy appearance, which we don't want. After finishing the back side, we are going to move on to the vertical sides, as I have been calling them. Let's fold over the flaps on both sides and press down and stick whatever portion of this flap comes over the front top surface. Towards the back side of this flap, we are going to make a cut similar to what we did previously, adjacent to the inner top edge, but we are going to cut this flap off corner to corner. At the front side though, we are just going to cut straight adjacent to the inner front edge till we reach the inner vertical edge. And press down and stick. Now moving on to the final and front edge. I'm just trimming these side flaps. I'm trying to minimize the bulk in the front as much as possible. And I'm going to make the same cuts as we did previously. I'm going to cut it along the front edge, leaving a little bit of margin. And then again, cut along the outer vertical edge, pull down the flap from the top, cut along the bottom vertical edge, and fold in the flap from the side. And then fold over the bigger flap, make those vertical cuts, cut corner to corner on both sides this time, and press down and stick the inside part.
Alright, so now our base is done, and I'm going to use the center part of the trim that we did, like the cutout from it, to kind of trim my magnetic sheet. I have trimmed and inserted the magnet. I had to do a little bit more trimming on the sides. Now this is just a piece of cardboard, which is exactly the height of this this whole tray. Okay, so now this, and then this is going to be our top.
A piece of duct tape is going to be our binding. We first stick the duct tape to the magnifying sheet, and then, ensuring proper positioning, add the cardboard strip and wrap the duct tape over to the bottom of the tray. Add a second piece of duct tape on the inner side to give a little strength, and then hold the magnifying sheet down securely. And now we are at the final stages, and we are going to cover up the duct tape because ain't nobody wants to see no duct tape on their pretty palettes. And finally, I added the metal piece on the lid, matching the magnet in the frame. In reality, I actually ended up using a piece of the exacto knife blade. Remember I showed you guys that one during my Dollar Tree haul? Yep, that one, because it's a little bit bigger than the metal piece that came with the magnet. I stuck the magnetic sheet down with the wood glue as well. And we are finished. The first one is the Ulta Beauty palette that we just removed a part of the foam insert to maximize the magnetic space. So now it holds all of my 8 Ulta shadows and has space for a few more if I end up purchasing any more in future. The second one, we started off with a pretty notebook from the Dollar Tree, and we added the mirror and a tray and the magnetic sheet. And I'm pretty happy with it. This one currently holds all of my NYX shadows and some other really old Ulta and Garden Botanica shadows. And finally, we have the palette that I made pretty much from scratch using a magnifying sheet on top. You can use any acrylic material that you might have. Tray made out of the Dollar Tree foam, and then just decorated it. This one currently holds my Maybelline shadows, the Deep Potted Cabana Boy blush, and some other eyeshadows, and has space for plenty more. All of my NYX singles and some other single shadows had pans, which were not sticking to the magnet. So in that case, I ended up adding pieces of the exacto knife blade to the bottom using a glue, and now they stick to the magnetic base. So yes, I'm really happy with all the palettes. I might end up adding a few more magnets to the transparent top palette, But other than that, yeah, I'm pretty happy. And I hope you enjoy this video and let me know what you guys think. Please hit like if you find it useful. Thanks again for watching. Bye.